And welcome back to the Golf Intervention Podcast. I'm here tonight in Richmond, Virginia. It was 100, literally 100 degrees, not hyperbole 100 degrees, but actual temperature. It was 94 degrees in my hitting bay, and it was hot. So Rob Fales and I, we're like tired tonight, but we are going to bring the energy for the listener. Rob, are you up for this? Are you up for the golf intervention playing lesson episode?
Absolutely. Yeah, it should be fun.
We're gonna bring the heat. I promise. We've been in the heat all day. We're gonna bring the heat. We're still riding a little bit of a high, I think, from our Sasho McKenzie interview, which is great. People are now kind of diving back into the Mark Sweeney interview, which is really cool. I'm getting lots of feedback from the listener. So you, the listener, we want to say thank you. You're the reason. And by the way, the only reason we do this. We do this for one reason. That's to help you. And as I was sitting around today thinking about what can we do for our next episode, because, well, I wasn't thinking about this today. It would have been yesterday. But however, we have scheduled, and we're very excited, and which Robbie has announced, that Dr. Raymond Pryor is going to be on in a couple weeks with us, which we are super excited about. And that's really going to sort of culminate our mental game series, so to speak, which has kind of been a loose series that we've been doing. But really great stuff. So give us a little bit of insight, Rob, about what do you think Dr. Pryor is going to be bringing to the show in a few weeks for the listener?
Oh my gosh. What won't he bring would probably be a better question. I've learned a ton from Doc when it comes to defining nerves versus anxiety. I think that's a huge one. Understanding what it means to truly accept, because I think people have a misinterpretation maybe of what acceptance is, and I think that misinterpretation kind of prevents them from ever exploring it, which it's a fundamental to high performance is our ability to accept all outcomes. And then finally, understanding being on time, what that means and how you can leverage that to really make your experience on the golf course more enjoyable and to increase the likelihood that you play the shots that you want. So it should be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about more in the context of things you can do maybe just prior to going out and playing, during the round, and then maybe even after the round as well. So should be a lot of fun.
And as I was thinking about that, I was kind of drawn back to that thought I had a few episodes ago where I say, as a PGA professional in general, but then someone who teaches golf and coaches golf, we wear a lot of hats. And the quote-unquote mental game part of it is a hat that's a little uncomfortable for someone like me. I'm much more likely to be wanting to work on things like golf skill, right? Or on-course strategy for playing, as opposed to saying like, okay, let's learn anxiety management techniques or whatever. And that's why Dr. Pryor, that's why we have people like him in the world, right? Like he's going to bring the real deal when it comes to that. And if you haven't read his book, Golf Beneath the Surface,
oh my gosh,
I'm going to tell you right now, you are not going to, I'm in the middle of reading it right now. You are not going to be disappointed if you go buy that book right now and read it as a golfer.
No.
You're just not. And a lot of what I always thought about sort of the quote unquote mental side was it all kind of, and I'm trying to say this in a way that doesn't offend anybody. For me as a golf pro, to try to communicate some of what I knew, which is I think what he refers to as kind of surface level stuff, is it felt phony to me. Okay, so I just it didn't feel genuine. And if you come to see me for golf lessons, you're going to know, Rob Fales, you would know this, there's nothing that's going to be not genuine about that experience in the Bay, right?
Yeah.
So to me, if I don't have that deep understanding, I'm going to guide you to something else. The way Dr. Pryor talks about it makes way more sense to me. Okay,
helps you really understand underneath the hood how your brain is literally designed, and then how you can leverage it to your advantage. It's the greatest thing I've learned in the last couple of years is what he's teaching us through that book. So yeah, it's really exciting. I'm really grateful for him for wanting to spend some time with us. So it should be fun.
Really, really excited for that. So as we were talking today, I think what I wanted to frame this episode out was like, when you and I do playing lessons, Robbie, with it, mainly amateur golfers, I would say, I think we're going to frame this out as like, hey, I'm trying to get better at golf as an amateur. This is not coaching up a tour player or a D1 player necessarily, although these are applicable there too. I played with 3 good friends of mine yesterday in Charlottesville, actually, Farmington Country Club, where I used to work. I love that golf course, and we played. And it just reminds me that, like, a lot of times golfers, amateur golfers, this is not their job, right? I mean, amateur insinuates, like, I play at golf a bit, and some people are more serious than others, but everybody typically has some goals and wants to play well. And so we can teach them skills, golf skills, which I think I spend a lot of time, and you spend a lot of time doing. How do I drive the ball better? How do I have better short game techniques and control of the ball there? How do I putt better? Like, these are the things that we are working with them on. And a lot of times then we send them out into the world, and then they got to go try to take those skills to the golf course. And I think that your ability to shoot a good score on the course has a lot of components to it. Golf skill performance, that what we were just describing, is just a part of it. It's a part of it. And the things that Dr. Pryor will talk about is like, okay, well, how do I get that to come out? How do I have the best way to produce that in the moment in a way that's going to allow me to be a better competitor and shoot better scores, right? And so your skill level as a player is, in a lot of ways, your golf skill. You're gonna cap your ability to shoot a good score with that. Like, if I don't improve my golf skills, I'm not gonna. If I'm someone that can't take less than 47 putts around, I'm not going to be shooting in the mid 70s, right, Rob? So like, I've got to perform in a way. I got to improve those golf skills to be able to. But I also got to be able to apply that in the moment. And so, as I was thinking about how do we encapsulate that whole thing? It's like, okay, if I'm going to go out and give a playing lesson, what are some of the major themes that you and I see with amateurs on the golf course? And we communicated about it a little bit, and I'm gonna just list them, and then we're gonna kind of go one by one. And this is not everything, by the way. We're picking a few here to talk about. So the number one thing, and I'm just going to introduce the 3. I'm going to list them, then we'll go back and talk about this one. Is really having consistent processes. Okay, and some people will use the term routine kind of interchangeably. And I'm talking about processes. I'm talking about from, getting from my house, getting to the course, going through a warm-up, getting my body ready, getting my golf skills ready, getting my mind ready, and then all the way to on the course where I'm having some type of a pre-shot process or pre-shot routine, and all of that being either insufficient or inconsistent. So I think that's something that definitely jumps out to me when I'm playing with AMs or giving playing lessons. Number 2 thing that I'm really thinking about here would be a term that you use, which we'll have Dr. Pryor talk more about, which is acceptance. Okay, so like accepting we're going to hit bad shots, accepting that we have dispersion, accepting that some holes are better than others and some rounds are better than others, and sort of riding that wave of the day. And then number 3, which is more of a golf skill type thing, is how do I decide what club or what shot to hit to maximize my ball getting on the green sooner or in regulation, if that's the key term. So those are the 3 things that we're going to discuss on today's episode, Playing Lesson with Eric Layton and Rob Fales. The golf intervention is coming at you right now. So Rob Fales, the very first bullet point there, the processes, which you and I did an episode on goals, right, where we talked about this. And I had someone the other day tell me, and this kind of blew my mind, very successful young guy, told me, and by the way, D1 college golfer, Naval Academy, successful young professional.
Yeah.
That episode on goals changed the way he saw his whole, in a way, life, in a way. And I was like, what? And it was kind of out of left field. We weren't even really talking about the show. And And a lot of it was about being less outcome focused, right, and more process focused. And I just thought that was so cool to hear. I think low key that might be my favorite episode of the 22 that we've done so far.
I agree. Definitely up there.
Just lots of good feedback from people on that one. And so when we talk about process, all kinds of processes, when we go out and I'm coaching up a golfer who, again, this is not their livelihood. They're just trying to play better. With you, Rob Fales, what do you feel like is the biggest one that jumps out? I kind of named a few of them, like pre-round, warm-up, pre-shot routine, maybe even like night before, mindset stuff. Like, what do you see in the processes that tend to be either insufficient or inconsistent?
Yeah, I think the most relevant process that we can talk about is how you're preparing for a shot, right? So I do recommend that golfers have a couple different warm-ups and they plan out what they're going to do to warm up. And actually, if you subscribe to the Substack, nice little plug here, we just posted a 15-minute warm-up that you can take a version of that and make it a 30-minute or a 5-minute. But I think like if golfers have kind of the stock warm-up, which would be anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour 15, hour 30, depending on your personality. So you kind of have like your normal warm-up, what you're going to plan for. But then if you hit traffic, if life happens, what are you going to do if you get to the course 30 minutes before your tee time, right? And have a general idea of what you're doing there. What are you going to do if you only have 15 minutes? What are you going to do if you only have 5 minutes? So just a couple of different kind of what-if scenarios and playing those out in your head can prevent you from what Dr. Pryor might talk about is the concept of negative surprise. But I think for at least this episode, let's talk about kind of a pre-shot process and kind of what we'd like to see with golfers in that scenario.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest one. And that will go into both the other bullet points. We'll feed off that a little bit. The pre-shot is really interesting because I feel like many people don't practice it, right? Whatever you want to call it, pre-shot routine or whatever. If you're on the ball, if you're on the range and you practice, the vast majority of the swings you take at a golf ball are on the range. If you're a practicer, way more than on the course. And so if I don't ever have a routine in place, it kind of gets me in a rhythm to hit the shot, gets myself focused the way I want to, helps me pick targets, helps me visualize a shot that I'm trying to do with intent. If I never do that on the range in practice and I get out on the course and try to do that, the routine part doesn't become routine anymore, is what I see. Do you
Right.
follow me there, Robbie?
Yes, you're doing something different, right?
Correct. So then it's almost like you're consciously trying to do, like if you are trying to do it, you're very consciously, effortfully trying to do it. You're trying to remember your routine, quote unquote,
Yes.
right? And then you're not focused on the stuff that really matters. And
Correct.
so then, right? So then
Yeah,
everything just starts to
completely
get
agree.
mixed up.
Yeah.
And then how long does that last before we just punt? Like, I'm just going to.
Well, that's honestly a really good point, is that if you don't ever practice a pre-shot routine, then just don't worry about having a pre-shot routine when you go play. Just because it, like you said, is probably going to take your attention away from what is relevant because you're trying to do something that is done prior to actually executing the shot. So, but what we would say is that there are things that you can build into a pre-shot process that would help your ability to hit the shot. So what we're not saying is don't have a pre-shot routine. What we're saying is that a pre-shot routine can be incredibly helpful as long as it is something that you're practicing. If you're not practicing at all, then it's probably, it might still be worth it, but it's a little bit more 50-50 at that point, because it could allow you to do some good stuff, but then it also could really be distracting, which is, I think, what you're saying.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to go into a long 20, 30-minute description of pre-shot routine. That wasn't what this episode was meant to be about. Yeah. This episode was meant to be more about pointing out the things that we see, right? And then in subsequent episodes, we're going to dig a little deeper here.
Yeah.
But in the pre-shot routine, you're trying to accomplish a few. I know for me, I'm trying to accomplish a few things. I'm trying to visualize a shot I'm trying to hit. Like, so I want to have a shot intent, right? I want to have a rehearsal of some point of some sort, and I got to aim, because aim is the thing I struggle with the most. So that's got to be all part of it. But it has to be routine. It has to be something that we kind of put on autopilot in a way. And it's like driving to work, right? After you've driven the same way to work, back and forth over years, there's this phenomenon that happens, and I don't know what's exactly called, but you don't actually remember doing it a lot of times, right? It becomes so, like, you're not consciously making decisions about where I'm turning or what lane I need to merge into or all this stuff, because you've done it so much that you're kind of doing it. I don't want to say unconsciously, but that's a lot of it, right? And so when you try to recall what you've done, you can't necessarily recall it, right? You probably know that. See, Rob Fales would know what this is called. He'd be like, yeah, in the research paper from 1983.
Dr. Pryor, I think he refers to it as like set it and forget it mode. That's probably not the technical term, but if it's good enough for him, then it's good enough for me to call it that.
Right. And so it's like, for me, I know when I'm in the right routine, the amount of steps I take to the ball is the same every time, like all this stuff. And I'm not trying to do that, but it's a rhythm to it. And so Why is this important? Well, I mean, I would love to hear the Rob Fales reason as to why routine, not exactly a routine, but why is that pre-shot routine important? What do I gain as a golfer by practicing and ingraining that routine that will help me score better?
Yeah, and so we want to first define that we're not as much talking about the physical steps of like, okay, you're going to take, now to your point, it's likely a good sign if things like the number of steps you're taking to walk into the golf ball, the amount of time, like the total routine time is pretty consistent. But I think just going after that and trying to make the physical steps the same is probably not really what we're trying to do. It's more of the mental routine of, you're going to assess the shot, right? You're going to make a prediction. You're going to act on that prediction, and then you're going to assess, right? Was my prediction basically what I wanted? Or if it wasn't, was it something about the prediction of the shot that could have been better? Or was it the execution? And if it were execution, what pieces of the execution were in place and which ones were out of place? So ultimately the routine is there because it's supposed to give you credible feedback that you can use then on subsequent shots. Whereas if you don't really have a process for making the prediction, acting on that prediction, and then assessing, basically giving yourself the feedback, then you don't know why the shots you hit well, you pulled them off, and you don't know why the ones that you didn't pull off, and then you don't know which things to then adjust if patterns emerge, because you're probably not going to be aware of patterns in the first place, and then you won't know what the options are that are available to be able to make an adjustment. So that's kind of the big benefit to the routine, is it gives you the opportunity to be aware of what's going on, which would then allow you to make more informed decisions later on in the round.
Awesome. And, and that sounds a lot like what we talked about in putting in a way, because we were saying...
it is. It's all the same. And
it's the feedback loop, because we were saying, well, if you don't start with reading, how do you know you've done anything else right? If you don't know if you've read it correctly. And I think this is so interesting. And we're going to keep revisiting the putt, although today is not the day, but I've been thinking so much about putting, right? Just because of the stuff that it keeps circling back. It circled back from Mark Sweeney from you to Mark Sweeney to Sasho to all these revelations really sort of piling back around one another. And it's about that green reading. It goes back to starting there, which is really interesting. But what we're saying in the routine, in the pre-shot routine, and if you're not an avid golfer, maybe you're like, what are you talking about pre-shot routine? Well, at some point, it's your turn to hit, right? And that routine can start before it's your turn to play.
Yes.
Really, a lot of times it does, right? But I've got to figure out how to get me from the last shot that I've hit through swinging and assessing the shot I'm about to play, right? So that the feedback loop happens. So I've got to do some input on my side. I got to determine like how far I am from the hole and, what club I want to play. And is there a shot that I'm trying to hit? I'm judging the environmental factors that are out there. And what I'm really trying to do is maximize, with that shot, my percentage play in some dispersion pattern, right? And then I've got to get myself ready to hit that shot and execute it when I have one chance. And that's where that whole mental process, there's a physical element to it too, like you were saying about the steps. And the point I was trying to make is I don't try to take the same amount of steps to the ball every time, but I know when I'm in a good routine, I'm feeling that. And sometimes I'll take one more step and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm too far. I started too far away. And then I'm like a little out of sorts. So I just kind of back off and I go back into it. And I'm not a slow player, by the way, but every now and again, I kind of get out of routine and I have to pull myself back into it. So, when I went and played yesterday, I haven't played a ton of golf this year just because when you teach a ton, you don't play a ton typically. It's just kind of the way it goes, unfortunately. And I set a goal for myself for the round it was a process-driven goal. I wanted to have every shot be in the moment and have my process the way that it currently stands. I want to execute my process. And I didn't do it on every swing, but I feel like I graded myself really high yesterday on that.
Nice.
And I actually played pretty well for having not played much this year. So I was excited, and it was a very enjoyable round of golf for that reason. So inconsistency, this is what we see. With the playing lesson is maybe they try to do it, maybe they don't do it, maybe they practice, maybe they don't, maybe they miss something in the routine, so they're not really focused. Maybe they're not having an intent for the shot that they're trying to hit. Maybe they're not willing to challenge themselves to hit a good shot or not. All of these things are pretty interesting and they pop up and they're pretty noticeable during a round of golf. So I think the process focus is something that we'll continue to talk about, and that pre-shot process is imperative. So the takeaway that I want for the listener today is that if you don't have a process and or you don't practice the process, and if you don't practice the process, you don't have a process. That's what I'm going to say. It's something that you need to learn more about, is what I would say, right? It's something to explore a little bit deeper. We'll deeper dive into it as we go through the next few episodes. But that pre-shot routine / process is what's going to get you likely maximizing your ability to hit really good shots on the course more often. Would you not agree there, or what did I get wrong, Rob Fales?
No, I would completely agree. And then it would also just educate. It would give you the likelihood of a more educated direction as far as, okay, well, this is actually what happened. Here's what was in place. Here's what wasn't. So, okay, now I know what question to ask my coach, or I know what question to ask myself in terms of how I'm going to spend my time in training before the next round. Because again, if you don't have a process and when I'm talking about process, it's really like the shot prediction. All right, so how are you predicting your intended carry target, your ladder, like your side to side, like your directional target, wind, lie, slope. Basically, those are the big ones. And then how are you kind of rehearsing any and all of your adaptations relative to those environmental factors, right? And so, there's just a lot of things that could cause a golf ball to go where you want and not. It's not always just, oh, that was a good swing or it was a bad swing, right? Right. It's so often something else that the golfer just isn't aware of. That's our job to make them aware of when we're doing a playing lesson.
Perfect. So that feeds directly into the next bullet point that I wanted to talk about, because it actually overlaps a lot of what we were just discussing. And I got to talk about something in this bullet point too, Robbie. So, clubs / shot selection. Easy for me to say. Club / shot selection.
Club / shot.
In a way that
club / shot. Club / shot.
Man, just say it 3 times over. Club / shot selection.
Club / oh gosh, I just messed it up.
This is in an effort to maximize, and I would say greens and regulation, but really, trying to accomplish sort of I love how you term it the scoring weight of each shot. And really, so it could be a tee shot. It could be most of the time it's an approach shot to the green. Am I going to maximize my ability to get it on the green? Which, as we know, and we've talked about, the data point that's probably the most relevant to scoring and being able to improve and jump levels is greens in regulation. Like if you're looking at one of the old school stats. So, here's what I see. Okay. Number one, either the player doesn't predict well enough how far the club they're about to hit is going to go, right? So that's a big part of it, and then that sort of wraps around things that you talk about, like
or they don't know how far their clubs go, right? Or they just literally they haven't gapped and they haven't looked on TrackMan and they're looking at their best shot as opposed to the center of their dispersion. Yeah,
correct. So how do I determine, from a data driven standpoint, how far my clubs go? So that's number one. Number two. Is there a shot that I'm trying to hit, like to maximize it? Now, what does that mean, Eric? Well, it could mean, hitting the ball higher or lower, or maybe curving it a little bit right to left or left to right. Like sometimes we do that. Depends on the player. And so if you're a beginner golfer, you're probably not doing tons of that, but you are doing some of that because you can run balls up on greens by playing a lower, kind of more running shot from a fairway. So that's one. But the thing that I really wanted to point out here is I think amateur golfers a little too often, this is not everybody, so everybody listening to this is not relevant to you. But I think amateur golfers, a good percentage, are a lot of times afraid to try to hit the right shot. And so they're afraid of the miss, or they're afraid, and now I know we have to predict that there's going to be some dispersion, and I get that. But there's certain situations where golfers are a little bit afraid to go for it. And getting the green in regulation is such a big deal that we have to be. And I sent you this Instagram video that went viral the other day, which I thought was just great. It was a wrestler, which everybody knows I'm a big, not fake wrestling, real wrestling fan. It was a sport that I did a lot as a kid. And he was talking about you've got to love to compete more than you are afraid to lose, okay? And in golf, I think there's certain shots that sometimes or certain situations that we shy too much away from, where we can hit the shot. You can hit the shot. But I'm afraid to go in the bunker, or I'm afraid to do this, or I'm afraid, play the shot. If you can get on the green, you should be trying to get there unless there's some hazard or whatever. But if I'm afraid to go over the back, or I'm afraid to go in the bunker, that's not good. We need to try. You should not be laying up with a 7-iron so you can hit over the bunker with a wedge. Am I wrong about that, Rob?
I would agree. Yeah. I think. I think a risk reward is part of the game, right? So you have to figure out what's the appropriate amount of risk to take on, and the least risk strategy is actually rarely the correct strategy. You should always be incurring some amount of risk with each shot that you're playing. How much? I think that's depending on the shot and depending on the player. But the zero risk strategy is never the right answer. The riskiest strategy is rarely the right answer. It's usually falls somewhere in between.
So let me give you a situation that happened the other day. So avid listener, he's going to know that I'm talking about him. He's going to laugh, and we'll have a joke about it. But in the fairway, downhill, long par 4, little bit of a fairway bunker to carry, maybe 100 yards away, nothing major. Right side of the green's open, left side of the green bunker. There's no hazards. There's no relevant out of bounds, something like that. And we're playing in this little match, a little card-on-card match or whatever. And
what hole at CCV?
This is at Farmington, number 14.
Oh, is at Farmington? Sorry, gotcha.
14
gotcha.
Farmington. Down, beautiful hole, by the way. One of the prettiest tee shots in all of Virginia. Downhill hole. So,
yep.
210 yards downhill, 220 yards downhill, and he's gonna hit a 5 hybrid. And I'm like, but you can't get there with a 5 hybrid. You go, yeah, I know. I'm just going to hit it down there and then pitch it on. I said, no. You're going to take your 3-wood and you're going to hit this thing down there. Well, but if I go in I said, listen, we're talking about greenside bunker. I said, you're going to hit it right over this bunker in front of you. I'm not worried about that. Probably 1 out of 20 times you hit it in that bunker. And to me, that's not relevant. Okay. Number 2, if you top it a little bit, it's still going to carry that bunker. It's going to roll down there as far as you're going to lay it up with your hybrid. Okay.
Yeah.
3, if you hit it really well and get the right bounce, it's going to roll on the green, which is a huge deal. Huge deal. Yes. And you're stroking here, buddy. I need that net birdie. Okay. 4, so what if you go in the bunker? Like if I'm laying up to 50 yards to avoid the bunker, I'm still likely making 5 most of the time, right? As a,
yeah, sure. Correct.
So he's like, okay. Hits a great shot, by the way. Guess what? Rolls in the bunker, hits it on the green 20 feet away, 2 putts it. It was a moment where I was like, see, like, point being, we can't be afraid of hitting certain, and if there's gaps in our skill set, we need to address those, right? But at the end of the day, we can't play without we gotta love to compete. Like we gotta love. I think that's just part of the mindset. Like I want to take on that shot. Again, to your point, that wasn't a super risky shot. It wasn't the riskiest shot, but it wasn't the lowest risk shot either. So we're trying to shoot the gap between the middle of those. And I think if you can play a shot with little risk that can get you to the green in regulation, you've got to take it. You just got to take it. And so that's part of it. The second part is learning how far your clubs go, right? Like just we've got to figure it out. And so if you don't know, take a lesson, right? So I know I do this all the time with my students. I'd be curious to hear, and I'm sure the listener wants to hear from you now. I've been talking a lot. Someone comes in and says, Robbie, I need to learn how far my clubs go. Take the listener through a 1 minute, 2 minute description of how you help them figure out how far they should be playing a club when they think how far my 7-iron goes versus my 8-iron versus my 5 hybrid. Like, how do you help them figure that out?
Yeah, so it would start with, I'd say for your approach play clubs, for a lot of folks, it's going to be 7-iron and down, maybe 6 if you're a little bit higher speed, getting into 5, 4 if you're a elite golfer. But you would want to start with understanding that it is the carry yards that we're concerned about. TrackMan, Foresight, they're going to give you a total, which is essentially a prediction. It's not directly relevant to what we're trying to do because anytime we're getting yardages, we always want to figure out, okay, what do I need to carry? Where am I going to land this golf ball? Because ultimately you're going to predict, okay, is it firm? Is it soft? What's it going to do? And then you're going to bake that into your intended carry distance. So first off, look at carry. And then second most important thing is that you're looking at the center of the dispersion. I think a lot of golfers will hit a shot. They'll hit it right out the middle of the face. They might match face and path pretty closely, or maybe hit a little high on the face, what have you. And they'll look at it as like, oh, I can hit an 8-iron 165 yards. Like, okay, well, that's the if you think of all of your shots as happening on a bell curve, right? Most of your shots are going to be kind of average. A very low percentage of your shots are going to be amazing, and a very low percentage of your shots are going to be what you would perceive to be terrible, right? So we want to figure out how do we get the bell curve, or basically 66.7% or whatever of those shots in a nice spot, right? So understanding like, okay, some percentage of the time you're going to carry it further than what you want, right? And you're going to be on the back of the green. Some of the time you're going to carry it shorter of where you want, right? You're going to be probably towards the front. But for most of our level 1 and through level 2 golfers, unless there's a penalty area short-sighted, or if there's a penalty area right adjacent to the edge of the green, the middle of the green's probably not a bad place to target, especially if you're only looking at greens and reg. As you start to work into proximity circles where you're trying to get in positions, blackjacks, things like that, then we want to change our strategy a little bit. But getting most of your shots on the green is probably a pretty good idea. Like I said, assuming there's not a penalty area adjacent to the edge of the green. So that being said, right, if you can picture the total dispersion of your shots, we are really, really concerned where the middle of that is going to be. And so some golfers will say, oh, that's way shorter than I think. Well, yeah, because you've probably been aiming your best shot, and so most of the time you miss the green. So most of the time you'll probably be front of the green. A lower percentage of the time you're going to flush it, and you're going to get to pin high, right? But then a lot of your shots, probably more than half of your shots, are going to be short, or maybe even off the green short. And so I like asking golfers sometimes, hey, when's the last time you've missed a green long? Or like what percentage of times when you hit it solid are you actually flying it too far? And a lot of recreational golfers will say, oh my gosh, that never happens. It's almost always short of the green. So I push golfers hard to really think of it in terms of the carry average dispersion. And that's what they're trying to target with.
Yeah, and there's no question. The data shows that the best players hit the ball past the hole most often with their approach shot. So why is that? Well, that's because they know how far they hit it, right? Just like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to play some really good ones that are going to go long because that's a lower percentage of shots that they hit. So one of those kind of like roll a thummy type things you can do is say like, okay, next time I play, why don't I play an extra club into the green all the time? Maybe if it's a flag in the back, maybe you don't do that. But if you're but just play, like normally I'd play 8-iron. Today I'm going to play 7, and then just track how many you hit past the hole. Yeah, see how many you hit past the hole. Then
yeah,
I hear all the time this one like, oh, that's my 150 club, right? Like that's a 7-iron. It's my 150 club. Well, I'm sitting there on TrackMan and it's going 141 carry, 139 carry. Best one's 144, and I'm like, oh, that's your 150 club. Well, it's because it's a range ball or something. Now, well, here's the story. If you pull your 7-iron at 150 and you hit it on the green, you just think you've hit the right club. Like even if it's on the front of the green, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you hit your 6-iron, you might have been way closer to the hole. So it's just one of those things that you got to pay attention to. Start plotting it out a little bit. Start tracking it a little bit. And I think Robbie gave a really good explanation there of how you try to determine it. It's not your one best shot. It's not expect the worst, just like we were talking about with your strategy there. It's about saying, I'm going to play this kind of center of my dispersion inside the bell curve kind of data predictive thing. And that's going to maximize for you because when you do miss it, you may still get it on the green. And I think that's the point that is most noted here. I can miss it short and still get it on the green. So
you don't have to make a perfect golf swing. Yeah.
Correct. Be aware of how far your clubs go. All right, so then that kind of rolls directly into my final bullet point for the day, which is just this general term, acceptance. Right? So we accept that we have all kinds of ranges of outcomes, right? Like if I pull 7-iron from 150 and it goes 140, a percentage of the time, I'm okay with that because I'm accepting of my dispersion pattern, right? If I have a bad hole or a bad stretch of holes, I still have to have acceptance of that. So let's talk about acceptance a little bit, Robbie. How does that fuel a golfer's ability to play and enjoy? This is the term I use with this. Enjoyable round of golf that's going to hopefully maximize my ability to score well at the same time.
Yeah, so we'll preview to next week. He's going to explain it much better than I will, but Dr. Pryor says acceptance is self-granted permission to perform freely without a guarantee. So what that means is that when you think about dispersion, right, you cannot guarantee that the ball is going to go where you aim, right? So you're accepting the fact that there is not a guarantee. So when you hold up fingers, when you figure out your average distance, and you're playing your average carry distance, you're giving yourself permission to swing without a guarantee. And I think that's the thing is like if we're always trying to aim this sniper rifle as opposed to a shotgun, we tend to think of anything that isn't hitting our target perfectly as being a failure, right? Whereas acceptance is understanding for your skill level what your dispersion actually looks like. And then if you hit it somewhere inside your dispersion, giving yourself correct feedback in the fact that that was close enough, right? Golf never, ever asks you to be perfect, right? It only ever asks you to be close enough. So you need to know for you what your dispersion looks like so that then you can start to make adjustments only when you're outside your dispersion. I can't tell you how many times golfers get themselves in a really, really bad place because they're trying to chase perfection when if they just understood that what they're currently doing is actually at or slightly above their skill level, then they wouldn't be having to spend so much time on something that's not going to really move the needle that much, or they could spend time doing something that's way more beneficial to their score. So acceptance is really, in the context of pre-shot routine, is aiming at dispersion, right? It's aiming the center of your dispersion from a carry standpoint. It's aiming the center of your dispersion from a lateral standpoint. And then it's also making an honest prediction of what is this shot going to do to your golf, or what is this environment going to do to your golf ball? How's the slope going to hit it? How's the wind going to hit it? From a lie standpoint, right? What adjustments do we need to make for that? And then swinging freely to see if your prediction panned out, right? So that's the acceptance piece is you're genuinely curious if your prediction was correct, or if not, what you're going to improve about your process moving forward based off of that. Whereas if you don't have acceptance, you might get pulled in the direction of, okay, well, I'm over the golf ball. Now I'm second guessing my process because it doesn't quite look right to me, or there's a little bit of doubt. So then I'm going to steer the golf ball to where I'm trying to get it to go to. And then as soon as you start trying to control outcome and your process starts to break down as you get closer to the actual execution of the swing, then not only do the likelihood of your outcomes going the way you want go down, but then it makes you less adaptable because the awareness of what just happened gets degraded. You literally don't know what just happened. Like the ball didn't go where you wanted, and you don't know why, right? And that's when frustration kicks in. That's when like this sense of helplessness of like, oh, like I guess I'm just like not that good, right? So like, then we talk about fixed mindset, so like versus growth mindset. So there's a lot of common threads when it comes to this, because acceptance really is kind of like a way of playing the game, right? It's you can either play through steering the golf ball, avoiding outcomes that you don't want, or you can either play through pursuit and acceptance, and then using the outcomes as information. I think is a much healthier, much more fun, much more sustainable way to play that would increase the likelihood that you improve over time.
This takes me back to something that at the end of the Dr. Sasho McKenzie episode,
yeah,
you asked him, and we were kind of joking around about the nerdy end of the interview, and you asked him about some stuff about the 3-dimensional flat spot and club face rotation, and all this stuff, and basically, Sasha was like, well, we're not sure. The club face could be rotated, but it's hard to measure it based on swing speed. We don't know. So all this stuff was going on. And, okay, if the smartest minds, and we're talking about the power of a major engineering golf club manufacturing, Ping. We're talking about one of the top researchers in the world, Sasha McKenzie, and top teachers in the world, Chris Como, and they're trying to define what's going on as this club is coming through the bottom of its arc, and no one can figure it out. Okay, and I mean that nicely. I'm just trying to summarize, right? I hit a shot on the course as a 17 handicap that doesn't go where I wanted to, and I go, what did I do wrong? Mm-hmm. That's the question, right? What did I do there? Well, who knows what you did there? Like, there's a lot of stuff that could be going on, right? And that's what you were just describing. Point being, if you have acceptance, you know that all kinds of ranges of outcomes are going to happen. What you don't need to do on the next shot is think, I don't know what I did. How do I fix the next one? That's not the deal. You might say, like you just said, well, maybe I was out of my process. Maybe I wasn't. This is what we need to focus on the course, right? Get back in the process, get your intent right, try to make the next swing better. Okay. I went through a little of those highs and lows yesterday. I hit one pull hook drive, not a big deal, didn't get me in trouble, but I was like, okay, rush that one a little bit, just kind of stuff. Like I wasn't trying to fix my next swing. What I was trying to do was pick an intent, hit my shot, accept where it could go. When it landed, I said, okay, let's go on and hit the next one. So you can't control the things that are going on. What I think Sasha was trying to say is there's things as human beings that we're doing athletically that can't really be defined, right? Like how does Victor Hovland have an awareness of that club face angle that's very different from how Rory McIlroy does it? They both do it at massively high speed and extremely well, and neither one of them could probably describe to you how they control 1 or 2 degrees of the club face, because it's just not something we do consciously. So when you're out on the course and you have acceptance, you realize all that is what I think I'm trying to say. And when you're out on the course and you don't have acceptance, you're trying to fix the next shot, which is just the thing that makes you miserable when you play a round of golf.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah, I couldn't say like everything that comes, everything that has to do with the skills, right? So like low point in 3 dimensions, club face, and speed, like we've said so many times, like the changes are so small. Like when you think about the difference between hitting one groove high and one groove too low, the difference between being the club face being 1 or 2 degrees more to the right or 1 or 2 degrees more to the left, the club head speed being a tenth of a mile an hour too fast for a ball lipping in or lipping out, like you can't possibly say that there's a technique that will guarantee that it'll solve for those differences. It's impossible. And so like my question to Dr. McKenzie was like, is there anything in terms of the rate of change? Like, okay, if my club face can be closing, but not closing as much in that same time interval where impact could, or the space interval where the impact could occur, like, is that going to make me more predictable? Like, what if the low point, like the club head isn't deviating as much through where impact could occur, right? Could that make me more predictable? If the speed, right, if the club head's kind of tapering off and kind of more like in cruise control or like coasting into impact, like, does that make me more predictable? And then so far the answer is no. Like, we don't know yet. Like, but there's definitely nothing in the research to show that it does. So until that's the case, until we know for sure that there's something that can account for these very, very small differences in these skills, the only thing we really have is to train them to a tolerance, understand what that tolerance or that kind of dispersion or the acceptance window is, and then go play, right? And just understand it's not going to be perfect, right? You're going to have variances to all 3 of those skills. And what you said is such a great point, because you're not trying to fix based off of one outcome, right? Because the people who are trying to fix based off one outcome are looking at the outcomes as more pervasive and permanent and personal than they really are. They're viewing the outcome as like an attack on them. So, okay, this is something that I need to fix. Mm-hmm. Whereas like someone with more of a growth mindset is more looking at the outcomes as temporary, specific, and external, and they're more curious about the outcomes because then they're going to inform process changes when they notice that they become a pattern. So it's such a different way to look at the game. So I love the point that you made there.
Well, I'm glad you liked it, because I think I think those are definitely 3 main bullet points that I'm seeing a lot when I do playing lessons. And so just to kind of tie it back all together, processes, just general, it could be, what do I do the night before to prepare? For me, like when I play a tournament, I've got to get my clubs clean and my golf balls marked the right way and stuff, so that when I can leave the house at the right time, and I know how long it takes to drive there, because I like to have about 40 minutes before my tee time that I can go hit my first shot on the range and all that. So like there's a timing to all that for me. And so I'm planning that the night before. That's part of my process, so I don't feel rush or whatever that that you were talking about. And then obviously in the pre-round warm-up, is there a process that gets me the confidence? I always say we're trying to warm up body, mind, and soul. It's like I got to get confident, I got to get my body ready, I got to get my skills warmed up, I got to get all that ready to go. And then obviously the process on the course of in the pre-shot, picking targets and, starting lines and all the stuff that we're trying to do, and having an intent, all those things that really drive the pre-shot routine. And then obviously the second bullet point was then trying to maximize, to hit some shots, be competitive. Don't plan for the worst. Don't plan for your best, but play golf in a way that's going to help you maximize your ability to get the ball on the green in regulation. So not most aggressive, not, ultimately the best I ever hit a club is the yardage I'm predicting. That's not going to help you, but you don't want to plan for the worst all the time either. There's something in the middle with those two things that helps you get the ball on the green sooner. And then the whole thing that ties it together is, like you just said, it's a growth mindset that allows you to have acceptance of everything that's going on, so that you're not in a fix-me state of mind the entire round, or you're tying some self-worth to your golf shots, which never, ever, ever fuels a good round of golf. Never. No. It just doesn't. I've never seen that in my life. And so having that acceptance really ties everything together so that you can just play a good round of golf, and you can have some bad holes. And then you could go on a stretch run.
Everyone's going to. Nobody's ever played a round of golf without a bad, like what they would perceive as a quote unquote bad stretch of holes or a bad stretch of shots. Like it's part of the game. It just happens, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with you. Like, you don't need to fix that.
My best round I played at Farmington when I worked there, and Farmington's a hard golf course. It's not super long, but it's tough, and I worked there 20 years ago, so we didn't hit the ball as far as we do now. And I remember what's cool about that place is it's in Charlottesville, Virginia. It's a club that has like 30-plus guest rooms and a national membership, so a lot of people travel in with ties to the University of Virginia and stay there, especially on football weekends. So one of the best parts of being at that job was when they had a kickoff time on a home game, that we could do a shotgun in the morning and get everybody out on the course. Just no competition. It was just a shotgun, so everybody could play. And then they would take shuttle buses to the stadium for the game. It was just a fun day. Everybody was excited. It's fall in Virginia. It's wonderful weather. And so I remember getting there early one day, setting up, and then you put everybody off and you don't have anything to do for 4.5 hours. And so there was 3 ladies playing, and they said, "Eric, why don't you join us?" And I said, "Okay, I can play with you. No big deal." So I go out there. Obviously, I had hit no balls, and we started on the 5th hole, which is the hardest hole on the golf course in a lot of ways. It's very hard. Long par 4, water down the right. And I hit my first tee shot into the hazard. And so, no big deal. Like, I didn't really care. I was, whatever. Drop a ball, make bogey. Next hole's a par 3. 3-putt that for bogey. I remember this very, very clearly. Par the next one, bogey the next one. So I'm 3 over through 4 holes. And I'm just like getting loose at this point, to be honest. I ended up shooting 2 under par that day. I had a stretch of holes where I birdied 5 out of 6 holes in the middle of that round because I never let it bother me. I didn't expect to play well that day, right? I didn't even warm up, right? I didn't even think I was going to play. I just went out there. And so there was this stretch in the middle where the ball was just going in for me. It was just silly. Like, I was making these 20, 30-foot putts. And the ladies we just had a great time. So I shot under par that day, which was really fun. I think it was my best round on the course in the 3 years I worked there. And I just remember thinking, wow, if I'd have started that round off with this mindset of like, oh, well, I'm just going to stink today. I'm not even going to keep score. Like, I'm just going to, I didn't even get to warm up. Like, I'm terrible at golf. Like, that would have never been the round that it turned out being, which literally made me feel incredibly good. And obviously the ladies then thought I was really good at golf, which was fun. So I'm sure they took a lesson or two. So it was an incredible day, but it was also sort of a culmination of all the things we've been talking about, right? Like acceptance, mindset, process, like all these things that just tied together for a really, really fun day at the course that could have, the golf pro shouldn't bogey the first 3 out of 4 holes. I could have had bad self-worth in that moment, but I didn't.
I thought, like you, and then you start thinking like, oh, what are they thinking about? Like, oh, like I shouldn't take a lesson from this guy, right? Like you start telling yourself stories that aren't true, right? Like it's not true. Like it's not like. Why do we default to telling ourselves these stories? I think it's like it's a it's a survival instinct, I think, or some sort of protection mechanism that we learned to build up through other parts of life that we try to carry into golf, which not always a great idea.
And I think, you kind of go back, and I'll credit my parents on this. Like, I played a lot of sports as a kid, and I played hard sports, by the way. I mean, my three main sports were about as hard as you get. I wrestled, I played golf, and I played baseball. Okay, so you want to talk about three very, very difficult sports. I played basketball in high school as I sort of retired my wrestling career, but at no point did I feel like my self-worth or the way that my parents felt about me was tied to my athletic performance. 0 times in my life did I feel that. And I think that really helps me as an adult, both as a coach and as a player and as a parent to my own children, because I don't live with the burden of like disappointing my parents with a bad day at the plate going 0 for 4. Like, there was never any of that. Like, what were you doing today? Like, you weren't watching the ball. Like, none of that ever happened. And the credit to my parents for that. I think that you have to have these mindsets that help you just be a good human, right? So like, I think that was very, very helpful for me. And that's probably, people tell me, Eric, you're so patient as a golf instructor. Like, I'm hitting terrible shots and you're not getting frustrated. I'm like, why would I get frustrated? Like, I know the next swing could be your best. Like, I'm just waiting for that to happen. So I think that having those mindsets and those things that we just talked about is really, really helps. And I think that hearing from Dr. Pryor, like we're going to do in a couple weeks, and by the way, people, get the book and read it now. Like, this is like, when you were in college and people were like, the professor's like, you should read before you come to class. You remember that? And no one would ever do it.
Yes.
Like, this is read before you come to class with Dr. Pryor. Because I'm going to guarantee you, if you're an avid golfer, 0% of you will be disappointed by picking that book up and reading it before you hear the interview with us. Or if you want to wait and listen to the interview. But I'm going to tell you, if you play golf, will learn from this. And so I think learning more from him specifically about the sort of clinical end of that is going to be exciting for me, because it's something that as a golf instructor has always been, like I said, a little bit of I don't feel qualified to speak on that stuff, right? So I try to shy away from it a little bit, but at the end of the day, if I'm going to coach people up, I've got to have a very good understanding of it as well. So I'm really excited to learn from him.
I 100% agree. I think you can't. What I've really started to learn in the last year or so is that you just can't separate them. Like, we think that the swing and your mindset are these two different things that you can, I'm just going to move this one thing and I'm just going to, no, you can't. Like, they're all intertwined. Like, it's so interesting. So yeah, it'll be a lot of fun to talk with him for sure.
And thank you for setting it up, Rob Fales. So that is your daily, I guess your weekly golf intervention playing lesson with Rob and Eric. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget, you can find our exclusive content on Substack. So if you go to the golfintervention.substack.com, you'll be able to find access to a very growing library of exclusive information. That stuff never goes away. That's the cool thing about Substack. It's going to archive it. We've already put 2 bonus episodes up there, both really interesting. Rob has put a bunch of stuff up there. Some of it with Dr. Pryor's information. Some of it is like he just put a 15-minute practice routine up there. He put a putting practice routine. Like, we're building a library of stuff, of content there that you can have access to. So don't forget to visit Substack.com if you want to check that out, the Golf Intervention. We are on YouTube now, so this episode will not be because we have a bad internet feed tonight, but that's okay. Other episodes are going up with some video. Robbie's mom's doing some great graphics on it, so we really appreciate that from her. Yep. And like I said, if you ever have any questions for us, the golfintervention@gmail.com, or contact us on our Substack.
There you go.
We'd love to do more question and answer type episodes. So just send us the questions and we'll do it.
Absolutely.
I think that's all I got for this evening, Rob. We'll be back at it next week with another fun episode. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Have a great week, everybody.
Cheers.